Today's teardown is of European variety. This is a Mercedes M156 6.2 liter V8. This came in a lot of the AMG cars that end in 6.3. It's actually a 6.2 liter. It's about a 500 horsepower engine, and I can tell that this one is actually from an ML63, judging by the part numbers that I found on this. I'm sure some of the external parts are chassis specific. I have no idea what's wrong with this engine. All I know is I'm gonna have to be careful and take my time because every part of this engine is worth some money. Mercedes must have been pretty proud of this because both valve covers are embossed with AMG, and there is a plaque on the intake manifold that says handcrafted by somebody's name that I can't read. I can tell you this engine has been partially taken apart already. This is kind of how a lot of these cores come in. That's a couple fuel rail bolts are loose, a lot of the intake manifold bolts are loose. It came in just like this, so I don't know a whole bunch about its history. I actually had to run some part numbers to figure out what chassis it came from. But I think this is going to be a pretty fun one to take apart. It'll be the first for me, so if I do things out of order or call a part by the wrong name, well, hopefully I don't do it twice. Very first thing we're going to do is pull the plugs and see what they look like. Oh no. Well, all these look pretty good except for one. That one, there's nothing to gap. Piston took a big bite out of that, so this is going to be fun. First thing we're going to do is pull the intake manifold, and as it turns out, all the bolts were finger tight, so I'm just ready to lift this right on up. Well, cylinders 1 through 4 all look pretty good. The plugs look good, so I kind of expected that. Now, from back to front, there's cylinder 8, 7, 6. Uh-oh. Look at that. I don't even see a guide on that intake valve. And I don't know if it's got to be a chunk of a piston. I don't even know if there's the bottom of a valve anymore. Let's see if we can fish that out of there. Come on. Well, the answer is no. I can't get that out. Not yet. Don't worry. We will. Knowing that there is a small issue with cylinder 5, we're going to start on that bank and pull the valve cover off. At first glance, this all looks pretty tidy in here. I don't see any major damage, but if you look a little closer, inside this little freeze plug, there's some debris. I don't really know what that is, but it is metal. If you look at this cam lobe, you can see some pretty, I wouldn't call them deep, but it's pretty scratched up. It's definitely going to need a polish, which is kind of a shame because these cams are worth quite a bit of money. I wonder if this is why they're worth money or if they're an upgrade for another engine. Now let's pull the valve cover off of the other side. This side looks much better. I don't see any signs of damage to the cam lobes. Again, we haven't pulled the caps off. We'll get there in a moment. This all looks pretty good. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and get the exhaust manifolds out of the way. So this just went from bad to unexpected. Where's the rest of those valves? They must have gone out the exhaust, or they're inside the cylinder. We're going to find out. Next thing we're going to do is try to get the variable valve timing solenoids off of the cylinder head so we can get the cams out. Now there is supposed to be a cam locking tool that you install to hold the cams in place when you take these phasers off, but I'm not going to do it that way because I don't have the tool here, so we're just going to buzz them off and get them off that way. Next, we're going to break all the cam caps loose and pull those off, pull the cams out, and see what the lifters and the top of the valve springs look like. Now, because I know the head is damaged, I didn't take these off in an order or keep them in order. I don't really think that was worthwhile, but if I were to save the head, I would make sure to mark all of those or keep them in order so they could go back to their correct spots. Let's pull these cams out of here if we can. Wow. Well, we don't have to go very far to see some damage, and we can tell where that came from. Look at that bucket. It's worn through the center. I wonder why. Let's see if we can get that out of there. Look at the inside of that. That's a first for me. Well, it looks like the that's definitely not supposed to come apart like that. And that is that's the top hat for the valve spring. There's the valve springs, which are not broken. So it didn't break a valve spring, at least not in that location. Let's pull the rest of these and see what these look like. Come back here. Well, that one looks okay. It's still in place. Let's look at the exhaust side. That looks all right. And door number 4. It's just that one. I wonder why that it looks like the top of that valve is beat to death too. I wonder why. Unfortunately, the intake cam did not survive. That's some pretty significant damage. That's a big bummer. These cams are worth a bunch of money. I did notice a little bit of metal in the oil, the residual oil that was sitting here and here. So that's not a good sign either. Just like last time, we're gonna hold the cams with this wrench. Before we can start trying to get the head off, we need to pull the Allen that holds this timing gear on. We need to get that out of the way. It's pretty far in there. So I found an Allen key that seemed to work. And then there's gonna be some special craziness to get this out. And now for the other side. Next, I'm gonna get the timing chain tensioner out, kind of release some tension. Next, we're going to take the pins for the chain rails. There's one here and one here. Let's see if we can. They're basically threaded, and I'm going to use a cam cap bolt and some junk I had laying around the shop to try to get these pulled out. I am not sure if this is going to work or not, but hey, we got plenty of tries here. As you can see, we got it out a little bit. We toasted one of those cam cap bolts, which is all right. We got plenty more where those came from. Well, this might be total overkill, but you know, it's fine. Use a slide hammer with this thing. There's one. Yahtzee. I have to pull the water pump to get access to the pins on the passenger side. So I left one bolt in her. If I can get it out. Why are they always shaped like this? One more. Let's see if I can get it with some good old-fashioned vice grips now. Oh, get out of there. There we go. Well, unfortunately, I've exhausted my resources. I don't have the special tool to pull this pin out. So we're going to cut the chain. The chain isn't worth anything, and the head, I'm pretty sure at this point, is going to be scrapped because of the damage we found looking through the intake and exhaust ports. So we're going to cut it on this side with an angle grinder, doing our best not to hit the head, but you know, it won't be the end of the world if we do. Now we can pull the cylinder head. First thing we're going to do is pull the 4 T45s on the front of the head, get these out of the way, and then we'll pull the head bolts. Time to get the head bolts out. Okay, I think I've got everything undone, so I can pull the cylinder head. Give it a little help here. Let's see if we can get it off now. I think I see a problem. Just maybe. There seems to be no piston in cylinder 5. And there are gouges that I don't know that you could ever get out. They are really deep. Several millimeters deep. The rest of the cylinders look okay. I don't see any major damage. So something let go in this cylinder. Let's go look at the head. Well, it's pretty bad. Let's see if we can get this piece of piston out of here. Come on. Man, that is jammed. It looks like there's no seat. That valve seat is gone. So maybe did it drop a seat? Maybe it got hot and dropped the seat. I don't think that's coming out that easily. Oh yeah. I think that's part of the piston. Yeah, that's part of the piston. Okay, I think I'm ready to pull this head as well. Hopefully this one comes off a little easier than the last. This side looks pretty good. I see there's just a bit of oil sitting in here, and could be how that engine sat before I picked it up. Outside of that, everything looks pretty good. As I was rotating this engine over, I found a non-original inspection port. I think this is going to get worse before it gets better. Now it's time to pull the lower pan, see if we can find anything underneath. I have a feeling we're going to see some interesting things. Also, most of the bolts appear to be missing already. Well, we have solved the case of the missing valves. There's one. Can I sort through the rest of this and figure out what it is? My hopes of getting a lot of parts from this are pretty much gone. That looks like part of a piston squirter. Where did the rest of the valves go? Oh, there we go. There's a valve. It's an intake. So we're still down one valve. Then we can put this back together. Just gotta find where all these pieces go. Well, we're gonna have to dig some more. I'm gonna fish all this stuff out of here so I can get to the bolts so we can get the lower pan off. But it's pretty popped, my friends. Pretty blown up. There's a circlip from a wrist pin. Seems to be a theme amongst very blown up engines. But I also don't see a seat, which is kind of odd. Well, we still have the upper pan to pull. Let's get the pickup off of the oil pump here. And I don't know if we can get the pump out or if the pan comes out next. I feel like the pan will come out next. Yeah, we'll try to take the upper pan off first. Well, that's not supposed to be in there. What is this? I don't know. Where did it come from? Some small springs. This is all metal that was sucked up. So clearly this just happened at idle. This is a really well taken care of car. They paid attention to every... No, I'm just kidding. Somebody blew this thing up hard. I don't think we're wrong. Ah, there's the missing valve and huge pieces of engine, which we will determine where that came from in a minute. That's piston. I think some of this is from this engine girdle or the lower block. Man, I'm just not getting lucky these days. Everything I'm buying is blown to smithereens. I don't even know where smithereens is. That is a destroyed oil pump. And that is likely from a rod cramming part of its piston into it, and there's nowhere for it to go. So it broke the pump. Too bad. I don't think we're putting this one back together. Next, we're gonna get this front cover off. But we gotta pull the crank pulley off first. Hopefully this comes off nice and easy. Not too bad. Okay, is it keyed or do I need a puller? I might need a puller. Nope. This is coming up. I am the puller. There we go. Now I have about 158,000 T45s. I mean, there's really not that many, but... Ah, it's raining piston. Now let's get the oil pump chain off. You guessed it, another T45. Now we're going to pull the oil pump off. Wow. Well, I don't think I need to take all the bolts out. Nope, sure don't. That part can stay there. There's a screen, and there's actually a ton of metal inside the oil pump. Huge chunks. I've never seen that big of chunks make it in there, and oh man. Look at all that. Now it's time to pull the lower block, which has a lot of bolts, but it won't be a problem. There is. We're going to turn this over, make sure we can get access to all the rod caps. I don't see it as being a huge issue. Let's see how banged up these are. Yep. All right, well, let's go ahead and get these rods and pistons out. Whoops. That bearing actually looks pretty good. Not what I wanted to happen. There's a rod out of cylinder 5. Bearing's a little worn, but it's not bad. It's not all chewed up. I don't think this is an oiling issue. Not at all. The crank looks good. I mean, the crank looks terrible, but the journals of the crank look good. Now it turns over nice. Bearings all look pretty decent. They are worn, but not awful. I don't think this engine had a ton of miles on it. And again, these bearings, while worn, they're not grooved or torn up. This was most likely completely unrelated to oiling. Now we can get the crank out. Here's a look at all the damage that piston delete on the fly I did. You can see how deep those gouges are in the bore. This block is going to find its way to the aluminum bin, I'm sure. I don't see what other purpose it would have. But considering what happened to this, I think it held up fairly well. It contained the explosion, unlike some of the other engines that we've seen so far. The 6 good rods and pistons, they are good. I don't see any damage. The debris didn't make it from one cylinder to its adjacent cylinder, so that's kind of cool. And all the rings look like they're in good shape. They're not all carboned up or locked in their ringland. This engine was in good shape before it blew up. Here is the piston and rod adjacent cylinder 5. All of it's damaged. I can't really tell if this is bent. It might be twisted. What I found odd is that the bottom of the piston skirt was making contact with the crank. I'm not quite sure why that is unless the rod is somehow bent. And here is everything from cylinder 5. We've got our gapless spark plug, our infinitely adjustable hydraulic lifter, 3 valve heads, and there's the rod. There's no piston. That was all blown apart in the pan. The bearings, not so bad. Just the rod and wrist pin doing their job as a hammer. All in all, I'm pretty impressed with the way that engine was constructed and how that engine came apart. It was actually a lot simpler to take apart than I thought it would be. It went really smooth. Would have gone a little bit smoother if I had the right tools to get the chain off without cutting it, but we made do and it came apart pretty easy. As far as what happened to that engine, I'm pretty sure it had something to do with that intake valve on cylinder 5. We found the damaged cam lobe, the destroyed HLA, and the keepers were nowhere to be found. It likely dropped the valve, probably at high RPM with someone's foot to the floor, and it just ate itself. I mean, it just came apart completely. But it still held up. The rest of that engine was relatively unaffected. It was just those 2 cylinders. So again, pretty impressed with that construction. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different. Whoever posts a comment that gets the most amount of likes in the first week this video is published is going to get sent a box of broken Mercedes parts from this ML63 engine. You're going to get the rod cap, the rod bearings, you'll get the wrist pin, the gapless spark plug, and the remnants of those 3 valves that broke. I don't care where you're at in the world, I'll make sure I get it to you. Just post something that everybody else likes and you'll get a box of free Mercedes junk. I know I would normally put that stuff on my counter, but it's starting to get a little full and I have to actually do business across that counter. And I know I need to show you guys that counter at some point. I promise it will happen. I appreciate you guys watching all the comments. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.